Okay, well, hello. Also, Aunt, you rated me the second I started, so thank you. I'll just do my intro in here with you, like with the default, if that makes sense at all. Nah, hold on one moment, please. But hello, Victor. Hello, Anthony. I hope the both of you are doing well tonight. Um, by the way, thank you so much for the raid. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Green. Green is in row. Pleasure to meet ya. I'm a variety streamer, primarily plays viewer-based games and story-based games. But once in a blue moon, I like to read some bedtime stories in the form of ASMR, and that is what I'm doing here today. I'm gonna turn up my volume a little bit, because I always tend to speak in a quieter tone whenever I do these. So you guys can just let me know if the audio levels are to your liking. And yeah, we're going to begin. Before we start, I'm actually going to get the cover of RWBY Roman Holiday. Just so that people who join in, aside from knowing the title, if I can actually get the image itself and not the WEPD. You know what? Maybe you'll allow me to do the WEP. You left Mario Kart. I know I left Mario Kart early. I didn't want to start this too late. Hey, Don. How are you doing? How is everyone doing tonight? Okay, hold on. So we're not watching Puss in Boots. We are currently... There we go. Okay. So I did stream this book before, and we got up to chapter 5, so we're going to continue tonight's reading with a little bit more than that. I don't plan to go for too long tonight. I'm just... not really. I'll do a few chapters though, because I also haven't streamed in a couple days. I've been pretty busy. But yeah, huzzah indeed. I appreciate you coming. So why don't we do this? We are currently on chapter 6, Cheat. As Roman approached Broken Memories, swinging his cane and whistling a jaunty tune, the shop's lights went dark and the neon open sign fizzled out. Roman reached the shop door and jiggled the knob. Locked. He tapped gently on the glass with his cane and waited. Bisk, I know you're in there. Your hours are posted right here, and it's still an hour before closing. He saw a figure shift behind the counter at the back of the store. I had to close early today. Something came up. Other figures moved around. Roman peered through the glass. A scroll lit up in the darkness. He heard a sharp, "Switch that off," before the screen went out. You still have customers inside. Come on, Bisk. I'm just picking up what you owe me. Roman tapped on the glass. Harder. Wham! The glass cracked. He hit it harder again. He hit it again. Harder. Wham! The crack spiderwebbed through the reinforced pane. Now, wham, look, wham, what, wham, you, wham, made, wham, me, wham, too. The glass shattered, and small gems of glass cascaded down. Someone screamed. Roman stepped through and flipped the light switch. Looks like you're still open after all. Guess we'll see if you really can fix anything. He whipped out his cane and knocked the computer screen off the workbench, sending it crashing to the floor. In my experience, some things are harder to mend than others, and the healing process can be long and painful. Roman looked at the customers huddling on the floor behind a display of scroll charging cables. One of them, a pimpled boy with messy brown hair, was holding a scroll up, recording video of Roman. Roman sighed and pointed his cane at the boy. "Drop it, hero." No! The boy stood up, still holding the scroll up in his shaky hands. Roman waited a beat, and then he activated the targeting reticle on his cane. It took the kid a second to realize what it meant. 3, 2, Roman counted. The boy dropped the scroll with a yell. Roman shot the scroll just before it hit the floor. It flipped up into the air, the holographic screen blinking out. The boy fumbled and caught it. The electronics sizzled and popped as it died, releasing a tendril of gray smoke. That scroll, for instance, pretty sure it's dead. Roman squinted his right eye and aimed at the broken scroll in the boy's hand, which lined up dangerously close with the boy's heart. No bringing that back to life. "Enough," Bisk said. "These are my customers. Please, let them go." "Of course." He lowered his cane and gestured it toward the door. "Thank you for your business. Please come again." The 4 customers hesitated for a moment, but then the boy with the broken scroll went for the door. When the others saw he had made it out, they followed suit. 4 customers. Glad to see business is booming. He aimed at a shelf of repaired electronics and fired his weapon. An old video game console exploded. "No thanks to you. Please, stop. These things aren't cheap to replace." Bisk loved machines more than he did people, and he seemed able to coax almost any broken device back to working order, no matter how far gone. That was just a cover, of course. His real business was reverse engineering the latest Atlas tech and cloning it for the black market. He was highly skilled and highly sought after, both from people who wanted to hire him and the police who wanted to arrest him. Speaking of cheap, Roman strode towards the frazzled technician. "Little Miss and the Spiders devote considerable resources towards keeping you up and running, but when I come to collect our fee, you try to hide. You can't escape us any more than an insect caught in a web can free itself. You're just stuck." Roman hooked his cane towards through the short man's suspenders. He wasn't going anywhere. "I can't keep paying these higher rates, Mr. Torchwick. Monthly payments were bad enough. I was just getting by. But double that is going to do me in." "You're a savvy businessman. What's the cost of not paying?" Bisk placed his hands on the counter and leaned forward. "If I could just speak to little Miss Malachite, I'm sure we could work out a deal." "You speak to me, and I speak to little Miss. This is the deal." Roman smacked the cane down on the counter, half an inch from Bisk's fingers. The man jumped back and cradled his hands to his chest. "Careful, my hands are worth more than you'll ever be." Roman froze. "So that's it. You think you're better than me because you went to school, learned a trade?" Bisk's eyes widened. No, I didn't say that. Maybe I'm too stupid to read between the lines." Bisk shook his head. "No, I misspoke." Roman walked around the shop, his cane out and dragging the devices on the shelves to the floor. He left a trail of broken scrolls, toy robots, cameras, clocks, and other junk. When he had made it all around the room and back to Bisk, pale and quivering, Roman smiled. "All right, you want to make a new deal? Here's my best offer. Left or right?" What does that mean?" Roman lifted his eyes skyward. "It isn't hard. Choose one, left or right." "But what am I choosing from?" "That would be telling." Left? And we have a deal." Roman grabbed Bisk by both suspenders and lifted him up and over the counter. He slammed the little man down onto his back on his workbench. "Now don't move, or I might miss." Roman stepped back and lifted his cane over his head. Bisk held up his hands. Please, don't. You think I enjoy this, Bisk? It's only my favorite part of the job, he thought. Crime doesn't pay, especially when you work for Little Miss. But he could have some fun with it. Just give me what you owe, and I'll leave. I can't, Mr. Torchwick. I don't have the money, but I'll pay you extra next time, I promise. Look at this place. You aren't going to have enough to pay me next time either. You're probably planning on skipping town. But that's going to be harder with a broken leg, I think. Bisk squeaked. Left, did you say? Roman lifted his cane again and prepared to smash in the man's left knee. That's enough, Roman. Chameleon stepped into the store, their skin shifting to its normal bronze, except for the left side of her face, which vanished into the colors behind her to hide the scars crisscrossing her cheek. She didn't wear much clothing these days because it thwarted her natural camouflaging abilities, and because when she chose to show herself, it could be quite distracting. Cammy, you're getting much better at that camouflage thing. No wonder she had fallen back into Little Miss's favor. Her semblance had value in her work, when she could hide herself in plain sight and overhear all sorts of information. How long have you been standing there? Too long, she said. Let him go. Hey, I don't want to interrupt you when you're working. This isn't your job, Roman. I know you've been doing a little side hustle. She tilted her head. Roman stepped back, drawing his cane behind his back. Does Little Miss know? He asked. What do you think? She knows all. Eventually. You've been collecting double payments from businesses for a while now. Who figured it out? She put a hand on her hip. That would be telling. So I guess I'm fired? No one gets fired. Spiders are in the family for life. When they get out of line, they get squished. Roman nodded. I knew this day would come, but I hoped it wouldn't be you. I requested this assignment. She crossed her arms. I finally realized I was just a side thing too. Don't flatter yourself, he laughed. I know hiding is kind of your whole thing, but it sure looks like you came in here unarmed. Her skin flushed crimson. That's not why, you idiot. She scowled. I wanted to understand. I thought you were happy. Why aren't we good enough for you? I've never been happy, and I expect I never will. But that doesn't mean I'm going to stop trying to buy happiness. Or I'm going to try to stop buying happiness. Roman walked around her, stepping sideways to keep her in the sights, and maneuver himself closer to the door. It wasn't that he didn't think he could beat her. He figured there would be others on the way, if they weren't already waiting for him. He resisted the urge to glance out the windows. You did not want to take your eyes off Cammy. Her skin crept closer to purple. Do you even know what you want, Roman? He spread his arms. I want more. I want everything. I want people to know my name. You've got that, she said. There's already a bounty on your head, and everyone in Mistral, crooks and huntsmen alike, are going to be looking for you. Something was up. She didn't have to tell him that. Oversharing wasn't in her nature, and she wasn't one to put off a fight. I'm impressed Little Miss is putting big money on this, Roman said. She didn't get where she is by spending frivolously. She has to. It's the only way she can separate herself from the scheming and double-dealing you did in her name. You haven't just lost her protection. Cammy sighed. She needs you gone for good. Roman tilted his head, considering. She was being very particular with her words. Unless he was imagining it. And she still wasn't trying to hit him. He didn't know if he should dare to read into any of that. Oh, wow. Sophia Ignazi, thank you so much for the raid. Welcome everyone. How is everyone doing tonight? For those of you who don't know me, my name is Green. Green is Emerald. Pleasure to meet you. I'm a variety streamer who primarily plays viewer-based games and story-based games. But we're currently taking a little bit of a break from that, because once in a while I like doing some Bedtime Story ASMR. But welcome everyone. Hello FT Waste. Hello Sophia. How was your stream? What were you guys playing? We are here for the stories. Well, I'm glad. Hopefully I can help soothe your soul. You were reading too? Oh, you also were reading. It's funny. Normally I do like a shout out command. But it doesn't actually. I didn't set it for this screen just because like it can get in the way of like the actual like sounds of the ASMR. But I greatly appreciate the raid, and I am The Princess and the Curdy by George MacDonald. I see. But seriously, thank you for the raid. I'll be sure to check you out after stream as well. In fact, you know what? I can just drop a follow. I can drop a follow right now. Field trips. Hello, Xenix Paladin. Welcome. But yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. All right. Why don't we get back to the story? Where was I? Then she disappeared as she took on the colors and shading of her background. She really had gotten better at that, but like everyone, she had to tell. Roman glimpsed a subtle shimmering on his right, like heat radiating up from pavement on a summer day. He spun and lashed out with his cane, blocking Cammie's roundhouse kick. Her clothes were made of some fancy new material that adapted to light, the result of Atlesian experiments with cloaking technology, with actual cloaks. In a rare crime deal some years back, she had shared some intel about a secret transport from Argus with Lemon, a crime lord in Kuchinashi. In exchange, she had run the operation to hijack it, and in true form, Little Miss had gotten away with the entire shipment. Invisibility cloaks were a hot commodity in the Mistral underworld, especially for the network of spies, and her own tech geniuses had figured out how to make the material adapt to Cammie's semblance. Little Miss took care of her own. He'd give her that, he thought wistfully, and she was just as fastidious about making sure that those who crossed her got what they deserved. Roman blindly blocked Cammie's flurry of attacks, relying on his senses to detect her mainly by hearing and anticipating her movements. When she moved fast, sometimes her skin and her invisible clothes lagged behind a bit, causing the background to tear and stutter. Not everyone would know to look for that or to be able to react quickly enough, anticipating where she would be instead of striking where she had been. It was mostly instinct, and Roman had honed good instincts during his time in the organization. It was a bit of luck. It also helped that he and Cammie had sparred with each other quite a bit over the years. He had probably trained more with her than he had with anyone else in the gang. "You're holding back," Roman said. "I'm just toying with you," she said. "You should know the difference. I learned it from you." So she was trying to slow him down. For what? He ducked and felt her fist whiff by his head, nearly knocking off his hat. He swept his cane out low. When he felt it make contact, he twisted her to hook her ankle and he pulled. She slammed down hard for a moment. A rainbow rippled across her skin from the impact. He fired at her. She rolled out of the way just in time and disappeared again. He looked around, but he couldn't see her telltale shimmer anymore. Either she had stripped for added stealth, it wouldn't be the first time, or... He looked up. One of the bare fixtures dangling on a long cable from the ceiling swayed slightly. "I've learned some things from you too." Roman shot at the light. The bulb exploded and glass tinkled down. A moment later, Cammie reappeared, in the process of flying toward him. She hit Roman head first and pushed him backward. She held tight to his lapel, so that as her moment carried her in a backflip over his head, she pulled him along with her and flipped him over her head. Roman soared across the shop and landed in a pile of broken computers with a jarring crunch. The air went out of him. "Cute," he wheezed. "You aren't bad yourself." Her skin took on a rosy tint. "Except for that ponytail." "What's wrong with my..." He blinked, and she was gone. Two could play at that game. Roman raised the reticle on his... on his cane and aimed carefully, panning around the room. Something shimmered in the corner of his eye, but he ignored it until he found his true target. He fired at the light switch by the door, and the room plunged into darkness, lit only with the dim bands of light from the street lamps outside, seeping through the slats of the window blinds. "You always did like the shadows," Cammie said. "People say I have a lot to hide, but you have more secrets than anyone. Secrets are deadly, but truth kills. Roman fired randomly around the room, the resulting fireworks briefly filling it with a red glow. Something caught fire. The adaptive tech on Cammy's clothing took a moment to adjust with the sudden shift in illumination, and the tiny shards of the broken bulb twinkled in the flickering light of the flames. Roman kept her in his sights as he continued to fire, scoring 3 out of the 5 hits on her. The last one broke her aura, and she faded back into the view as she stumbled, fell, and skidded to a halt. Roman approached her prone form and rolled her onto her back with his foot. She glared at him. "Still glad you came to kill me?" Roman asked. Her face relaxed. "You idiot." "Excuse me? That's an odd choice for your last words." "I didn't come here to kill you. I came here to say goodbye." She rolled her head in the direction of the door. Spotlights were shining on the front of the store, and Roman saw silhouettes slowly moving in. "They're here to kill you, in case I failed." Roman stared at her in disbelief. "Why?" he asked. "Because we might have made good partners once. I work better alone. That wouldn't be my takeaway from the situation." She coughed. Maybe from her injuries, maybe from the smoke starting to fill the room. "Consider that you might have gotten what you wanted after all, if you hadn't only been in it only for yourself. If you had allowed yourself to trust someone. Life doesn't work that way. Not mine, anyway." The only person Roman had ever trusted, his mother, had left him in a children's orphanage in Windpath. Adam taught him an important lesson that he would never forget. Lie, cheat, survive. And maybe it was time to work on that last part. "Go on. You have to do it," Cammy said. Roman lifted his cane over his head. "Bye, Roman." She closed her eyes just before he whacked her. She was knocked out cold. Better that way for her, he thought. As he snuck out the back door, he heard shouting from inside the shop, sirens from the fire brigade. He'd made a mess of things, just the way he liked to. He took one of the longer, twisting routes back to his old hideaway. He had to get out of the city, but he needed 2 things first. A change of clothes, because these were all sooty and smoky, and the money he had packed away over the years, his very small cut of the jobs done for Little Miss, the spoils of some of his side jobs, and the more sizable funds he had been collecting for 6 months as part of his unsanctioned extortion. He slid aside the secret panel above the window and reached in. Empty. He slammed his fist against the wall. He'd been so careful, but someone had found his hideout and stolen it from him. It was probably the same someone who had ratted him out. So much for honor among thieves. They could have at least given him the chance to pay them off for their silence. Whoever it was must have had something to gain by eliminating Roman, or a bone to pick with him. He could obviously rule out Chameleon, begrudgingly, but when he found out who it was, he smashed his cane into his table, cracking it in 2. He took a deep breath. He reached back into the hidden compartment and pushed up gently, releasing a second hiding spot. A tight roll of Leanne dropped into his hand. They had taken a lot from him, but not all of it. It wasn't much, but it was enough for a fresh start. But where? Nowhere in Mistral would be safe for him with a hit out on him. In fact, if Little Miss really wanted him dead, nowhere in Remnant would be safe. Vacchio was a good place to hide, but the desert was probably one of the few fates worse than Little Miss. And while there was a thriving criminal element, it wouldn't be particularly welcoming to a newcomer. There was no future for Roman there. Atlas? Roman laughed to himself. Mansell offered slim pickings for criminals like himself. The crime syndicates ran on Atlas money, so it was hard to make a dent on your own. Plus, the price for getting caught was too high. Solitas was also a little too frigid for a fair-weathered guy like him. So Vacchio was too hot, Atlas was too cold. That left Vale. Plenty of territory, lots of opportunity to carve out a niche in the capital city, and those crime bosses had never seen anyone like Roman Torchwick before. As an added bonus, Little Miss had made plenty of enemies in Vale, which made the insider knowledge Roman had of her operations extremely valuable. He'd be running the show there in less than a year. I'm just gonna drink real quick. Okay. Let us continue. Chapter 7. Falling Out. Trivia knelt before her bedroom door, probing the lock with a tension wrench and pick rake she had fashioned from a hairpin. She just couldn't get this one to open. She consulted the tutorial video how to pick any lock on her scroll once more and repeated the motions exactly. She applied gentle pressure to the tension wrench so it would rotate the plug slightly. Then she scraped the pick against the blinding pins. She felt some of them slide up and lock into place above the shear line, but she just couldn't get one of them to budge. She tried to hold everything in place while she reached for another pick, but the slight movement caused the pick to slip and all the pins fell back down. No, she almost had it. She threw the picks across the room, narrowly missing Neapolitan. Her friend was wearing a brown duster over a rose-pink corset and black tights, something Trivia had seen online and thought it might make a fun outfit. It suited Neo, at least. Neo scooped up the pins and held them up, a smirk on her face. Trivia gestured at the first 3 locks that she had managed to unlock, though they had taken her most of the night. Over the last few months, the locks on her door had been increasing in complexity. In the process, she was becoming quite the lockpick, but this last one was just too tricky and too new. She hadn't even been able to find any diagrams or guides on cracking it yet. Papa had promised that if this didn't keep her in, he'd upgrade to a hard light force field, joking that the Atletian tech would be cheaper than putting their local locksmith's children through Beacon. Neo's face lit up, and Trivia groaned to herself. That always meant that her friend had come up with an idea that was likely to get Trivia in trouble. An idea she just couldn't say no to, because it was also too much fun to pass up. Neo dropped the lockpicks and pointed at a can of hairspray on Trivia's makeup table. Hairspray? Trivia picked it up. She shot Neo a questioning look. Neo swept a hand through Trivia's night table, which held a book of fairy tales, a handbell, and a chocolate-scented candle. Trivia guessed and held up the candle. She studied the 2 objects in her hand for a moment before she realized what Neo had in mind. She looked up at the girl. Neo winked. Trivia lit the candle and wondered how much heat it would take to melt it. As she shook the can of hairspray, did she have enough? Even if it didn't melt the lock, the heat would cause the metal to expand slightly, which might make it easier to coax the tumblers into place. Here goes. Trivia held the burning candle in front of the lockpick and pressed her index finger against the little button on top of the can, aiming the nozzle at the small flame. She pushed a little harder, wincing in anticipation. Neo clapped, and Trivia pushed down hard, spraying a fine chemical mist towards the candle. Whoosh! The small flame burst into a plume of fire. Trivia felt the heat on her face. She leaned back and held the makeshift flamethrower steady on the lock. The shiny brass turned black, and the paint around it blistered and bubbled. It smelled like melting crayons. And then the door caught fire. Trivia gasped and dropped the candle and can. She stomped on the candle to stamp out the flame, but the fire continued to envelop the door. Smaller, bright blue flames dripping from it onto the carpet. Neo stepped up to the door and knocked gently on it. She looked at Trivia, her mouth made a small O. The door is made of wood. Trivia grabbed a pillow and started beating at the fire, but all she did was set the pillow on fire. She tossed it at the ground and kicked it. It burst into a cloud of burning feathers. She rolled her eyes and backed away. The room was filling with smoke, and the fire was spreading rapidly. Trivia couldn't call for help, of course. She looked down at where she had left her scroll, on the floor by the door, which was already consumed in fire, so she couldn't text for help either. Do something, Trivia glared at Neapolitan. Neo crouched and warmed her hands over the spreading flames, rubbing them together. Trivia looked around her room for something that she could use to put out the fire. Why wasn't there an extinguisher in here? All she saw were copious amounts of stuff that would feed the fire. Books, board games, clothes. useless junk that her parents kept giving her, thinking they could buy her love or make her room seem less like a prison. Stuff that she had fantasized about burning stuff that she had fantasized about burning into a bonfire to show them how little she cared for it all. She coughed and blinked. It was getting hard to see now. Maybe it hadn't been such a good idea to start a fire in the locked room. The damn door was probably going to burn down before the lock melted. She could have used her hairdryer to heat up the lock instead, she realized now. She retreated deeper into her suite, but without inner doors to close, she was just buying herself a little time. The smoke was probably going to get her before the fire would. In the distance, a smoke alarm went off, but Trivia was home alone for the evening. Her parents had gone out and locked her into her room to prevent her from getting into more trouble. Trivia laughed, but her throat was so raw that it came out as a wheezing cough. She had to open a window. In the back of her mind, she realized that opening a window would only feed the fire, pulling it through the room more quickly, but if she didn't get air, she would die. The window stuck at first. She shoved until it swung open. She leaned out of it, sucking in fresh, cool air. Smoke billowed around her, spilling into the night. Their house was miles from anyone, but she had hoped that someone would see the smoke in time. She felt a wall of heat pushing against her back. She looked down. Her room was on the top floor, at the back of the house, about 40 feet from the ground, too far to jump, even if she rolled like she had learned in gymnastics. But her aura should give her some protection, if only she had something to slow her fall. She ducked back into the room. She couldn't see anything now, but she felt her way to her bed and reached under it. She fumbled around, grasping until her hand closed on the handle of the parasol she had stolen 3 years ago, the one she had used to strike Papa. She ran back towards the window and leaped before she could change her mind. She flew out and away from the burning room and immediately felt relief from the raging inferno. She wasn't burning anymore, but now she was plunging downward. She held the parasol up, grabbed onto it with both hands, and pressed the button to open it. It flew open, and she was yanked up and back as the paper canopy caught the air. She dangled as she drifted down towards the sprawling garden. She had seen this in a movie once, but she couldn't believe it was actually working. As she drifted down, she felt like Alex falling through the world. Then she heard a tearing sound. She looked up and noticed the constellation of scorch marks in the paper as the wind and gravity began to rip it apart. She concentrated and patched it up with her semblance, reinforcing the fragile paper, imagining it as a thin, light, durable film that would absolutely not shred and drop her 20 feet to the ground. She drifted lower, but so did her aura, already drained from protecting her from the heat of the fire for so long. She looked down past her kicking legs. 15 feet, maybe. She had a choice. Hold the umbrella together for as long as possible, risking a bad fall, or releasing her physical illusion and hoping she had enough aura left to cushion her landing. She let go of the illusion and the parasol in the same moment and plummeted, eyes squeezed shut. And to her surprise and relief, someone caught her before she hit the ground. She opened her eyes. A Neapolitan smirked before her form glitched, and Trivia dropped through her briefly insubstantial arms to the ground. Neo covered her mouth in a silent laugh. Trivia was on the verge of exhaustion, but she kept burning the last of her aura to hold Neo together, to hold herself together. Trivia sat at the entrance to the garden, arms wrapped around her knees. Neo curled beside her with an arm over her shoulder. They watched the top floor of the Vanille mansion as it was consumed by flames. "It's so pretty," she thought. She heard sirens in the distance. At the same time, a car roared up the driveway. Her mother shouted at the front of the house, calling for her. Trivia and Neo waited until Mama and Papa found them. Her parents pointedly ignored Neo, as they always did when she appeared in their presence. "Thank the brothers you're all right," Mama said. Papa seemed more concerned with the house than Trivia. He gazed up at the fire eating at the top floor, a section of roof caved in where Trivia's room had been. He flinched. "What have you done?" Papa roared. He rushed toward Trivia and grabbed her by the shoulders, pulling her to her feet. "You stupid girl!" "Jimmy!" Mama grabbed his arms. "It's all right. We can fix the damage." He shoved her off of him, but he let go of Trivia. His arms stung when he had squeezed them with his, His arms stung where he had squeezed them with a claw-like grip. Papa turned away from both of them and resumed watching the window of her room as if he expected something to happen. Trivia stepped back, appalled. Papa had yelled at her, punished her, even ignored her over the years, but he had never hurt her before. Excuse me. Trivia looked to her mother for help. She was flustered and confused. Jimmy, what is it? What are you looking for? She could have blown us all up, he muttered, and now the fire department will be in there, and who knows what they'll... He shook his head. Cops, too. They'll want to search the house. He glanced at his wife. We could be ruined. I don't understand. What are you worried about? At least we're all safe. Forget it, he said. Better if you don't know. It was just an accident. She looked at Trivia. Her voice hardened. It was just an accident. Trivia nodded. I can't imagine what you were thinking, Trivia. Trivia shrugged. She pointed at Neo, who smiled and flipped her hair back. She held the singed and torn parasol over her right shoulder. No, Papa said. This is all your fault, Trivia. I'm so tired of Neo this and Neo that. Mama stalked towards a pink-haired girl. She isn't real. She drew her hand back and slapped Neo. The girl shattered into hundreds of pink small shards. Trivia rushed forward and tried to gather the pieces back together, but they fell through her fingers. The last of her aura fizzled out, and Trivia collapsed to her knees as the broken fragments of her only one friend swirled around her like powder petals in the wind, and faded. The approaching sirens grew louder. Trivia stared at the empty space where her friend had been, tears streaming down her face. She had felt a shift inside her at the moment. Neo had vanished, like her heart had broken, or something had been set free. Even an imaginary friend is better than no friend at all, and Neo had been so much more to Trivia. Now she was gone. I'm right where I've always been, said a voice in Trivia's head. The only voice Trivia had was her internal monologue, the one that said things she couldn't say aloud. Neapolitan had always been that other voice who told her what to do, who comforted her when she was sad and alone, who always knew what she was thinking and what she truly wanted deep down. Dr. Mazarin had often talked to Trivia about Neo, trying to make her understand that her imaginary friend was very real to her, but that she was also a part of her, unlike Papa and Mama. Dr. Mazarin hadn't wanted Trivia to send her away or pretend she didn't exist. She had said that Neo would leave one day when Trivia was ready, when she wasn't needed anymore. Oh, I'm not going anywhere, Neo said. Just try to get rid of me. Trivia. She sounded like Trivia. She had always looked like Trivia too, and the way she had wished she could be. Neapolitan represented everything Trivia didn't have: the freedom to express herself, the carefree spirit to do whatever she wanted. Trivia smiled. She took in a deep breath. She felt complete for the first time. She felt like herself. Get up. Trivia hopped lightly to her feet. She thought she would be shaky and weak, but she Hey, Shiro. Thank you so much for the raid. Welcome everyone. How is everyone doing tonight? So, for those of you who don't know me, hello, my name is Green. Green is Emerald. Pleasure to meet ya. I am a variety streamer who primarily plays viewer-based games and story-based games. And today, we are currently doing some ASMR of a bedtime story. I'm currently reading RWBY Roman Holiday. And yeah, I'm intending to keep this pretty short today, but I appreciate the raid. I normally would do the Clippy shout out, but I can't actually do that on this screen. So yeah, I'll just continue. But I very much appreciate the raid. I would ask what you were doing, but I know what you were doing. So how was the end of Mario Kart? I hope hope you had some good end of races. Toast and Nini bullied me. That's part of the course. Like, if you're not expecting that, I don't know what to tell you. But okay, I'm gonna get back to the story. Trivia hopped lightly to her feet. She thought that she'd be shaky and weak, but she had flawless balance. She felt strong. I expected to murder them all. Well, you will eventually, don't worry. I never want to see that thing again, Papa said. Do you hear me? Trivia pretended to wince and covered her ears. She rolled her eyes. Obviously, I'm mute, not deaf. Can't stay, have to head off for the night. Have a good night, Green friends. Okay, Nini. I appreciate you stopping by. I hope that maybe... Okay, but I know you're hopping off, so I can't actually help soothe you at any point. But that's okay. I appreciate you. And I will see you, and I'll talk to you later. Papa glared at her in astonishment. She hadn't said a word, but she had clearly communicated her disdain. He stomped toward her and raised a hand to hit her. You little... Jimmy, Mama said. Trivia put her hands on her hips and locked eyes with him. She raised an eyebrow and smiled, daring him to touch her. He scowled and walked away. She heard one of his cars start and drive off before the sirens and heavy boots on gravel drowned out the sound. It's clear that you don't want to be part of this family anymore. Maybe you never did, her mother said. You would rather burn it to the ground than stay here. Trivia licked her lips. Without her scroll, her communication boards, she couldn't respond, if she could even find the words for what she was feeling. Oh my god, you're reading physical? Yeah, I'm reading a physical book. The only book I've ever actually enjoyed. So be it, her mother went on. Trivia grabbed her mother's arm, but Mama shrugged her off. We can't do anything more for you. We don't know what you need, but there's one place that might be able to help. Train you to be a better person. She stroked Trivia's cheek and brushed a lock of her hair from her pink eye. She seemed surprised by what she saw on her daughter's face. Help you become a whole person. Trivia's heart raced. They're sending me away? Where? That's all Trivia had ever wanted. To be someplace where she fit in, where she could be herself, where she didn't have to listen to her parents or hide what she could do. Maybe you'll even make some friends, real ones, and learn how to control yourself. Get a handle on your... She waved her hands in the air to indicate Trivia's semblance. The hope Trivia had felt died. Her mother wasn't offering her freedom. She was just sending her to a different prison. At least you won't have much to pack, her mother laughed harshly. She nodded absently and then left to talk to the firefighters, leaving Trivia alone by the garden with smoke in the sky and fire in her chest. I'm gonna drink. Okay. Are you ready for Chapter 8? Chapter 8. Survive. Coming to the city of Vale was the best decision Roman had ever made. The place was full of rubes. If he had grown up on the streets, he never would have had to fall on a crime lord like Little Miss Malachite in the first place. Anyone with natural talent, a devious mind, lofty ambition, and bankrupt morals could take whatever they wanted. In other words, him. Roman could feel it. He was home. The only thing standing in his way was the fact that the police had a much lower tolerance for criminals than Mistral did. Apparently had some kind of reputation to uphold as a light to other kingdoms throughout Remnant, blah blah blah. To be honest, Roman had stopped paying attention to his real estate agent as she bragged about the low crime rates, good schools, and thriving art and music scene downtown. He just wanted to be in the middle of action. It's impressive, isn't it? His agent, Miss Burgundy, joined him at the window of the penthouse suite she was showing him. This is the best view of Beacon Academy anywhere in the city. Roman squinted at it. Our architecture seems a bit outdated. We call it classic. In my line of work, I always thought it seemed magical. Like something out of a storybook, she sighed. I always dreamed about going to Beacon Academy. You wanted to be a huntress? Doesn't every kid want to grow up to be a huntsman or huntress? Only my nightmares, he thought. I'm guessing that didn't work out, he said. No, and her face fell. No, I washed out of combat school. It isn't for everyone. You have to play to your strengths, and if you're lucky, you realize exactly what you want before you're destined for. What you're destined for, and you grab it. He made a fist and clenched it. I guess real estate was my true calling, she laughed. I guess so. I'll take it. Her face lit up. You will? Don't you want to know how much it costs? Doesn't matter, because I know what I want. He winked at her. She giggled. In fact, he knew exactly how much it cost, and it was going to wipe out his illicit savings, even though, of course, he'd avoided paying for his passage from Mistral and food along the way. But Roman believed in going big, and he needed that incentive to get out there and get to work. Nothing motivated you more than hunger. Going to work meant learning the ins and outs of every neighborhood, essentially casing it out for criminal opportunities. He knew a little bit about the players in Vale thanks to Little Miss, but he needed to see how they controlled their territory. Figure out how to exploit their weaknesses, then take over their operations. So, Roman played the tourist. He walked around the city, visited businesses, picked out the crooks, asked subtle questions. He watched. He studied. He planned. And when he was ready, he made his first move. He could have started small by robbing a grocery store or stealing a car, but that's what any penny-ante crook would do. That wasn't Roman. Not anymore. Not here. Is this an actual RWBY book? It is, yeah. Called RWBY Roman Holiday. The origin story of Neapolitan and Roman Torchwick. And it's a pretty good one. So his first plan was to hold up the first bank of Vale. A little fish in a big ocean could still make a big splash, particularly when the ruling crime syndicates thrived by staying under the radar. He set out for the bank early on his 7th day in Vale, with a spring in his step. He had empty pockets and an empty stomach, but not for long. On a busy weekday morning just before lunch hour, the sidewalks were crammed with people going about their business, which made it easier for Roman to go about his business. As he passed a kid walking while reading a scroll, Roman stuck out his cane to trip him. Then he whirled and caught the hapless pedestrian before he ate pavement. Wow, thanks. That was clumsy of me, the boy said. My pleasure. Roman tipped his hat. Have a nice day. You too. On the next block, without breaking stride, Roman plucked out the cash from the wallet he lifted from his mark and tossed the wallet in a trash bin. At some point, when the kid reached for the wallet in his coat pocket, he'd come up with Roman's calling card, imprinted with the words, I was robbed by Roman Torchwick. Roman used the money to buy breakfast. Not every transaction had to be illegal, and picked up a little extra money picking from some more pockets. It might have seemed greedy to steal from innocent people when he was planning to make a big withdrawal from the bank, but it made a good warm-up, and taking advantage of people always put a smile on his face. There it was, the first bank of Vale, another example of classic architecture. The tall columns lining the front entrance and the large stained glass windows gave the two-story building a grandiose appearance. That was one of the biggest differences between Vale and Mistral. In Vale, they chose form over function, perhaps because they had the luxury of more territory to spread out over. That was it. Luxury. Everything in the city was planned and intentional, from the clean sidewalks and paved streets to the buildings reaching for the sky. Whereas in Mistral, you built wherever you could, and cities were defined more by accident than intent. Alleys were more trafficked than roads, at least by those who worked best under the cover of darkness. In that sense, Vale and Mistral were like mirrors of each other. One a place of openness and light, the other a place of secrecy and shadows. Of course, Roman knew that in both cases, it was all just a facade, just as it was with people. Every place and every person existed in an equilibrium between light and dark, good and evil. He had been walking that line his whole life, and that was why he would succeed here as much as he had back in Mistral. More so because he wouldn't have anyone holding him back. Roman opened the front door of the bank and held it open for an elderly woman just leaving. "Oh, thank you, young man. Such a gentleman." Roman grinned. "My pleasure. Have a nice day." "You too." "Oh, I will," Roman thought as he entered the building. He had been here before already to take pictures with a scroll, which he had scrutinized for several days along with the blueprints he had copied from the city planning office. He got into the short line of customers and sized up the situation. It was just afternoon, so only 2 of the 6 teller windows were open, and the others were out on their lunch break. There were only 2 security guards, positioned at the bank entrance and beside the vault in a cage behind the teller windows. Roman counted 4 cameras, 1 fixed on the teller windows, 1 fixed on the vault, and 2 scanning the entire room, angled to capture both the entrance and the customer service area. Another bank employee was seated at the desk on the side, and all told, there were about a dozen customers, half of them in line with Roman. He took a deep breath. "You got this, Roman." When it was his turn at the head of the line, he was directed to the front into window 6. He was a bit surprised to be greeted by a faunus man with pointed black dog ears jutting from their lanky black hair. "Good afternoon. Thank you for choosing First Bank. How can I help you today?" the man asked. Roman put his cane on the counter and rested both of his hands on top of it. "I would like all your money, please." The man stared at him. "Good one," he said, a mildly puzzled look on his face. Roman looked back at him and didn't say a word. "Wait, seriously?" His eyes flicked to one of the security guards. "Are you robbing the bank? That's the general idea, so come on, make it snappy. Shouldn't you have a mask or something to hide your identity? You watch a lot of movies." "I do, yeah." "Well, thanks for your concern, but I'm good. I know what I'm doing. There hasn't been a bank robbery in the city in forever. Hey, do you have a gun?" Roman looked around. Is he kidding me with this? He read the name on the teller's name badge. "Fred, let me guess. You're new here." Fred bobbed his head. "I am. This is my first job. I just graduated in the spring." "Congratulations," Roman said dryly. "Look, just hand over the money." The kid looked at him expectantly. Roman rolled his eyes. "And nobody gets hurt." Fred smiled. Then the smile faded and he leaned closer to the counter and whispered conspiratorially, "I'm not supposed to." "Of course you're not supposed to." People looked at him when he raised his voice. He calmed himself down. "That's why this is a robbery." Fred leaned back. "Oh, right. Could you move a little faster? Kind of in a hurry here." Roman glanced back at the guard. The guard was watching him now. Great. Roman picked up the cane and flipped the gun side up. The teller looked at it curiously. "Is that?" His eyes widened. "He has a gun." He ducked under the counter. Roman sighed. Then he turned and pointed his cane up. "Good afternoon. This is a hold-up. Everyone drop to the floor and don't move." About half of the customers looked up in panic, while the others ignored him. The security guard by the door pulled an earbud out of his ear and headed for Roman, fumbling for his gun. "Hello, this is not a drill." Roman fired. With a bang, fireworks shot out of the tip of his cane, and a moment later, pieces of the ceiling drifted downward. Well, that got everyone's attention. Several people screamed and rushed toward the door. No one dropped to the floor like he had demanded. Why doesn't anyone ever listen? In Mistral, people knew how to be robbed. It must have been more a common occurrence than it was in Vale. Mistral banks didn't even care about it anymore, since insurance covered everything, and sometimes they were even complicit with the crooks. Their way of getting out of paying protection money. That's why the gangsters in Mistral called robberies economic stimulus. Who cared whether the people spending the money were citizens or crooks? It was all good for business, as long as the money stayed in Mistral. The guard broke into a run and drew his gun. He planted himself and crouched, exactly the way an action hero would in a movie. He trained his gun on Roman. "Drop the weapon." Roman lowered his cane and leveled it at the guard. It was a good old-fashioned showdown. From the corner of his eye, Roman noted the other guard leaving his post at the vault to try and sneak up on him. All 4 security cameras were now trained on the unfolding action. "Don't make me shoot," the guard said. "Do your worst," Roman replied. The guard squeezed the trigger. Roman lunged with his cane and tapped the side of the gun to push it slightly to the left, as he also moved a step to the right. The shot missed Roman, and the glass broke somewhere behind him. Roman flicked his cane up, knocking the gun out of the guard's hands. It flew and hit the marble floors and skittered away. "That really was your worst," Roman said. "Unless that was your best." He swiveled his cane around, hooking the man's wrist with the curved handle. He pulled the guard toward him and kicked his stomach at the same time. Bones snapped at the guard's wrist and a rib broke. The man spun away from the impact, screaming in agony before landing in a heap. He curled up on himself and continued wailing. "Shut up," Roman aimed his gun. "Freeze." Roman turned toward the second guard. Teaching moment, if you'd shot me instead of yelling." Roman broke off and fired, hitting the guard's hands. He dropped the gun with a whelp. These guys were lightweights. It was a wonder the city hadn't been taken over by crime lords by now. Roman was already starting to like it here. The guard raised his hands in the air, a universal sign of "I'm way over my head." Now, Roman hopped onto the counter and leaned over it, pressing the tip of his cane up to Fred's head. Roy looked like he was finally ready to take the whole situation seriously. "My money." Roman turned slowly, pointing his gun at all the customers who were finally laying on the floor face down with their hands on the back of their heads. Everyone seemed to have seen the same movies about bank robberies. What a time saver. "In fact, that goes for everyone. I'm going to collect all your money. Wallets, jewelry, scrolls, spare change. Come on, empty your pockets. If you have chewing gum, I want that too." Roman spoke to the second guard. "I want all of the cash in the vaults too. Take those 3 with you." Roman gestured to 2 women and a young boy. The guard and the others climbed to their feet uncertainly. Roman cocked the gun again. They hurried off. Roman heard sirens in the distance. Vale's finest in blue were on their way. Roman pointed to another bank employee. "You, lock the doors." "At least let them people out," the man said. "Relax, you'll all be fine, as long as I get my money." He looked at the clock above the door. "The service here is terrible." Before the banker could lock the door, it opened and 2 people walked in. A man with long silver hair and a woman with no hair at all. They were dressed for a fight. The man's sleeveless shirts were made of bands of silver, matching silver bands around his wrists, and were bright against his dark skin. He had a belt loaded with small pouches, and his loose-fitting pants had many pockets. Combat boots with steel toes completed the ensemble. Excuse me. His bald companion was outfitted in a black tank top and short red jacket, crisscrossed with bandoliers loaded with dust vials. She had a pleated leather skirt over black leggings and mud-splattered red high tops. Iridescent lines spiraled down each of her cotton-white arms. Huntsman. The pair took a moment to assess the situation. They clearly had walked in unaware there were a robbery in progress. "We're closed," Roman said. "Come back later." "What's going on here?" the man said. The woman assumed a fighting stance, holding what looked like a kid's slingshot. "You're cute, but slow, Rock," she said. Was it Roche? I'll go with Roche. That sounds cooler. He retrieved a metal rod from his belt. One end of the weapon had rows of wicked spikes on it, and the other end had 3 flexible claws. He pushed a button and the rod extended to his height. The claws opened and closed. Roman hopped down from the counter. "I don't have time for this," he said. "Neither do we. The sooner we stop you, the sooner we can deposit our checks." She zipped toward Roman. He fired at her 3 times as she zigzagged, only just missing her each time. Before he could correct for her speed and direction, she was leaping into the air and coming at him with a corkscrew kick. He sidestepped her, and as she landed, he hooked her right ankle with his cane. He started to pull, but she lifted her legs and spun around on her left foot, pulling him instead. Roman went flying, but he twisted himself around and came down facing her, sliding backward a few steps. Almost too late. He saw the other huntsman charging toward him like a bull. Roman jumped aside. As Roche went by, he held up his weapon. It extended even longer, and the claw then grabbed Roman's right wrist like it was in a vice. Roche stopped and braced himself, holding onto it and keeping Roman from lifting his cane. Roman aimed his cane at the man and fired. The sudden flash of fireworks made the man drop his weapon and stagger backward, covering his eyes. The claw on the end loosened, and Roman shook it off. He turned and saw the huntress aiming at him with her slingshot, a vial loaded. "Nice toy," Roman said. She let loose, and the vial flew toward Roman. He shot it easily, and it shattered in front of him. Tiny crystals exploded from it and settled over his hands and coat. He looked down at the red and green powder covering his hands. He tried to shake it off him, but it only stuck. Then it started popping. He felt pinpricks of pain wherever the dust crystals exploded and dissipated. Another vial crashed and broke at his feet, and he found he couldn't step back because his shoes were stuck fast in the floor. Roman shot straight down, and the floor crumbled, releasing his shoes. He backed up slowly as the two huntsmen closed in on him. "Sweet work, Candy," Roche said. "Not bad yourself. It's quite refreshing to fight a bad guy instead of Grim for a change." Roman scanned the room. The civilians had moved to the other side of the room, clustered together watching the battle, some of them streaming it from their scrolls. Cops were parked outside. Officers were standing around waiting for the huntsmen to do their job for them. It was time for him to end this. "You're pretty good. Where'd you learn to fight?" Candy asked. "Mistral," Roman said. "Which combat school?" "Self-study." Roman narrowed his eyes, and he went for Roche, swinging his cane at him. Roche broke the swing with his metal staff and swung the spiked end at Roman. The guy was strong, but consequently his style was somewhat clumsy. He counted on his strength to get the job done. Roman knew how to use that against him. Roman was faster and more nimble. He continued to parry and thrust, while slowly moving to put Roche between Roman and Candy, so that when she fired another dust vial at him, he was perfectly positioned. He aimed and fired at the vial, but he didn't shoot a projectile, only a burst of compressed air from just the tip of his cane, which redirected the vial at Roche, just as he was swinging his staff. His weapon made contact with the dust vial, which broke and splattered a green goo-like substance over him. He looked back at Candy with both surprise and disappointment, as the substance hardened into jagged crystals all over his body, immobilizing him. As Candy tended to her partner, Roman deployed the grappling hook on his cane. It latched onto the crossed bandolier. He began reeling her in like a fish. Candy reached behind her and tried to free herself, as she was pulled toward Roman. Just before she reached him, she unfastened the bandolier and rolled free. Roman fell backward from the sudden shift in weight, but he had her dust vials. She faced him and held up her slingshot before her. "What are you gonna do with that?" Roman dangled the bandolier over his head. "I have your ammo." She squinted at him, and the belt in his hand began vibrating. No, it was the glass vials that were vibrating. One of them, which had a yellow powder, cracked. Roman studied Candy. Her weapon wasn't just a slingshot, he realized. It was made of some kind of metal, the shape of it reminding him of a tuning fork, and it was vibrating. She was somehow using it to generate a high-frequency sound wave. A window pane cracked. The yellow vial burst, and when the dust touched Roman's hands, he felt first a spark, then like a bad electric shock, and then arcs of lightning began to crackle across the grains. Roman dropped the belt and kicked it away as more vials began popping. A red one burst, spraying small fireballs into the air. A blue one flash froze the surface of the floor around it. "This is weird," Roman said. He heard a high-pitched whine now, and the stained glass window behind him shattered, sending a rainbow of deadly glass shards into the air. "Psst, psst. What's up, Shiro? How can I help you today?" I see that, is this in regards to the fact that there are apparently 3 different... Gotcha. When are we going to have an ASMR book reading of your fanfiction erotica? When I actually get fanfiction. But alas... Time to go, Roman said. He spun around and swooped up the bags of Leanne. Thanks, he said to Fred. He used his grappling hook to propel himself up to the broken window and at the back of the bank. No cop cars on the street. Yet. He turned and doffed his hat to Candy and Roche as police officers finally swarmed in and surrounded the two huntsmen. My heroes, he said. He jumped backward out of the window into freedom. Back in his apartment, Roman watched the Vale News Network on his brand new 70-inch TV while he ate the most delicious meal of takeout barbecue ribs he'd ever had. The news anchor, Lisa Lavender, was calling the afternoon's robbery of the First Bank of Vale one of the most brazen displays of lawlessness she had ever witnessed in all of her years of reporting. Stop, you're making me blush. He made a note to send Lisa some flowers signed to his biggest fan. One of the biggest questions stumping the police is, who was that unmasked man? Though he made no attempts to hide his identity, even seeming to welcome the attention, he has no criminal record in Vale or anywhere else on Remnant. However, we believe we have the name of Vale's newest criminal. The video cut to Lisa interviewing one of the people who Roman had pickpocketed early that day. You reported earlier that your wallet was missing, isn't that right, Mr. Zhu? I'm going to be on TV? Sue asked. Well, we'll see, Lisa said. You were pickpocketed and found something? Oh, that's right. Instead of my wallet, I found this in my pocket. He held up a black card with white lettering on it. The camera focused in on it while Lisa read it aloud. You've been robbed by Roman Torchwick. Video cut back to the studio. In fact, this Roman Torchwick pickpocketed dozens of people in a path to the bank, leaving his calling card in place of their precious cash. Police are hoping to track his path to the bank from reports. You don't think I thought of that? Roman shouted at the TV. I thought of everything. If it does indeed turn out he is responsible for the bank robbery, that raises some baffling questions as to his motive. Perhaps this Torchwick was more interested in people knowing his identity than he was in the money itself. Roman raised a glass at her. 2 birds with 1 stone, dear. Meanwhile, the huntsmen who were apprehended and initially charged with the robbery, Roche Salt and Candy Floss, are still being fined for the destruction of public property and reckless endangerment. This isn't the first time they've been reprimanded for using excessive force and gross misconduct. The Vale Huntsman Guild reportedly is considering suspending their licenses. 3 birds, Roman said. We spoke to a local expert on huntsmen, Professor Ospin, headmaster of Beacon Academy, about his take on their actions today. The TV showed a man with gray hair and dark spectacles seated in front of a large window looking out over the city of Vale. Roman looked out his own window towards the school's campuses on the edge of Beacon Cliff. We hold huntsmen to high standard because they wield more power than citizens, power which can be just as dangerously as it can be a force for good, if used maliciously or carelessly. I do believe Mr. Salt and Mrs. Floss operated with the best of intentions, and I hope they can learn from this experience and come out of it stronger. Accepting a license means accepting the sacred responsibility of protecting others from anything that threatens their safety, whether by humans or Grimm. He turned to face the camera. One more thing, Roman Torchwick. Roman almost choked on his drink. I assume that you are new to Vale. You got away today, but be assured we will be watching you, and the next time you cross a huntsman, things may not go as easily for you. The program cut back to Lavender. Inspiring words from Professor Osmond. Professor Lionheart, master of Salt and Floss's former school, Haven Academy in Mistral, could not be reached for comment in time for this story. More of this developing story as we have it. The program cut to a shot of a stately mansion with a fire truck in front of it. We now return live to the Vanille Estate, home of the Vale City Manager Jimmy. Roman switched off the TV. Well, things hadn't gone quite as planned, but they had turned out even better than he expected. You can't complain if you had a roof over your head and a full belly at the end of the day, and he had accomplished what he had set out to do. Announce his presence in Vale, establish his intentions, and send a message to both local law enforcement and the crime syndicates. There was a new crook in town. Roman looked around his empty apartment, and for the briefest of moments he missed his old crew. He missed Chameleon. Moments like this were meant to be shared, and Brick, Mortar, and Rusty would have been toasting him right now for making those huntsmen look like fools and pulling off a massive crime in a broad daylight under the noses of the police. Roman put down his empty glass and raised the bottle instead. "Cheers to me," he said. Tomorrow he would pick another bank and do it all over again. Okay, I'll do one more chapter and then we'll call it. We'll end it on a Neapolitan chapter. But, okay. Sorry, I'm just catching up with a few messages. Okay, why don't we wrap this up with one more chapter? I'm gonna also drink just a tad. Thank you, thank you, Shiro. I have now hydrated. Hydrate your fingertips too. I do not feel like going upstairs to wash. I do not feel like going upstairs to do that. But that's okay. Ah, crap. Okay, hold on. Alright, thank you. that was last of my drink. Okay. Chapter 9. Arrival. "Welcome to your new home," Mama said. Trivia and her mother walked up a winding flagstone path toward a wide building that resembled a small, cozy castle. The most prominent features in its pink granite facade were 3 tall, arched windows reflecting the morning sun. A short square tower with pinnacled corners rose above the center window. At its base was an arched entryway with Lady Browning's Preparatory Academy for Girls carved into it. "This will never be my home." Trivia wrinkled her nose. She turned around, calling Mama's bluff. They just wanted to scare her into behaving better, being the daughter they wanted. But Mama grabbed hold of Trivia's sleeve and pulled her gently toward the entrance. Trivia shook her head frantically. I'm sorry. Her mother looked away. Trivia snapped her arm back from her. "I'm not sorry. You set a little fire in your house, and the next thing you know, your parents were sending you away. Well, maybe things won't be so bad here. This is what she had wanted, right? To be out on her own. There were other girls here. Trivia would make friends." A girl Trivia's age met them at the entrance, holding open one of the red double doors. Her ghost white face contrasted dramatically with the dark blue of her jacket. Trivia surveyed the rest of the uniform. A white blouse, gold scarf, and matching knee-length dress, black tights, and high-heeled boots. The only jewelry she wore was a silver pin over her heart adorned with a triple spiral. Trivia held up a hand and waved awkwardly. The girl's flat expression didn't change, but her eyes dipped to take in Trivia in her princess pajamas, her only clothes that hadn't burned in the fire. Mama said there would be no point in buying her a new outfit because the school would provide everything she needed. The girl's right eyebrow twitched, but she betrayed no emotion. She turned smartly on her heel and led them down a corridor lined with group photos of girls all wearing the same uniform and the same emotionless faces. Former classes, Trivia figured. Looks like they know how to have a good time here. The girl stopped in front of an elegant door, knocked once, and departed. As she passed, she murmured something under her breath so only Trivia could hear. It was so low she wasn't even certain she had heard anything, and it wasn't until the door opened that a moment later Trivia realized the girl had said, "Good luck." Another uniformed girl, this one with tan skin and close-cropped black hair, opened the door. Trivia and her mother stepped into a combination office and parlor outfitted with extravagant furniture, knick-knack tables, credenzas, a velvet reclining couch, a vintage love seat. Portraits and tapestries hung around the room, and an entire wall was decorated with framed photos of glamorous women with personal notes and autographs. This office did remind Trivia of home, but not one of the rooms that they used to welcome visitors. Some furniture was meant to be admired, but never touched. Trivia noticed Mama praising each piece, a twinkle of envy in her eyes. From across the room, an older woman rose from her broad desk like a living monolith, every bit as imposing as the school itself. She was extraordinarily tall. Granted, everyone was taller than Trivia, but this woman was easily 6 feet and thin. She reminded Trivia of runaway models in the Vale fashion shows she used to like to watch. The headmistress, too, wore the same jacket, blouse, and dress as the students Trivia had seen, but on her the outfit was stunning, smart, sexy, and a little dangerous. This was how it was meant to be worn. In comparison, the girls looked like they were dressing up in their mother's wardrobe. The woman glided across the room and clasped her hands together warmly. She was even more impressive up close. Her gray blonde hair was swept up into a beehive, only adding to her height. Her fair skin was dusted with gold powder that sparkled when she moved, and dark eyeliner exaggerated her wide, piercing lavender eyes. Bright red lipstick dared you to look away. She made Trivia abruptly conscious of her unwashed, unkempt appearance and her ratty soot-smudged pajamas. "Welcome back, Carmel. It's so good to see you, and to see you doing so well," the woman said. "The school hasn't changed," Mama said. "Neither have you. I'm glad you haven't forgotten your training." Trivia stared at her mother. She had attended this school? Trivia recalled that her mother had a gold spiral pin like the one of the students' uniforms, but she only wore it on special occasions. "You must be Trivia," the tall woman said. "If I must, I must," Trivia thought. Mama jostled Trivia with her elbow. Trivia shot her an annoyed look, and then she curtsied, as sarcastically as she could manage. "Oh my, that won't do. You have certainly come to the right place, and just at the right time, from the look of things. Trivia, this is Lady Beatrix Browning. My girls just call me Lady Beat," the woman said. "Jamie and I are so grateful that you could fit her into the school halfway through the year," Mama said. "Your generous donations over the years have benefited the girls so much," Lady Beat said. She turned her attention back to Trivia. "Your mother tells me you don't like to talk." Trivia scrunched up her face. She shook her head, touched her mouth, and shrugged. "Will this be a problem?" Mama asked. "Oh no, in fact, quite the opposite. As you know, one of our core principles here is better to be seen, not heard." She winked at Trivia, and often it's better not to be seen at all. Trivia found herself smiling despite herself. Lady Beat was charming, she'd give her that. "Well, good," Mama said uncertainty. "What happens next?" "Now you go, and Trivia stays. She'll be measured for her school uniform, and while the girls prepared for her, I will administer a short aptitude test to figure out what she's good at and where she fits in. Some girls are natural leaders, but others are better suited to following." She considered Trivia. They both have their place and their value. Lady Beat gestured to the girl by the door. "Please, show Miss Vanille out." Mama studied Trivia for a moment, various emotions flitting across her face until she settled on tenderness. She wrapped her arms around Trivia. Trivia did not return the hug. "I'll call in right," Mama said. "Try to be good here." Trivia waited, blinking back tears. "I'll miss you." Her mother brushed away imaginary tears and headed for the door. Trivia drew in a deep breath. "Welcome home, Miss Vanille," Lady Beat said. When she said it, Trivia almost started to believe it. Okay, that wasn't really that long, but I'll stick true to what I said. That will be where we call it for today. Well, I hope you guys liked that. Whenever I do ASMR streams, I do not raid out because the whole point of these streams is to help you guys fall asleep. So, I hope I succeeded in helping you guys fall asleep. And thanks for streaming Green. That was good. Thank you, Shiro. I appreciate that. But yeah, we will not raid out tonight, but I will try to stream soon. I do apologize. I've been pretty busy for the last few days, and trying to like work up the care to do a lot of things has been kind of dwindling recently. But yeah. So for right now, Reasonable here, and I'll see you guys next time. Ciao for now, and have a good night's rest. Good night.